Tony, we'll start with you. Just talk me through that news poll. There is a drop in the primary vote for both sides.
Yes, for both sides, they've dropped 1 point each, so it's a bit of a race to the bottom at the moment, which reflects the lack of hope that's been offered in this campaign in terms of real ideas, big ideas that capture the imagination of voters. And so what we're seeing is an increased non-major party vote. It was 31% at the last election. I'd expect it to be higher again tomorrow night. And
both parties, Kos, are responsible for that disengagement?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the last 4 to 5 weeks, in our research, we've seen about 1 in 5 Millennial and Gen Z switch their votes to something other, and most of it's gone to minor parties. So we've seen massive growth of Gen Z within the Greens, and obviously across all the other minor parties and independents.
And just help the viewers understand that. Contrast that with the last election.
Yeah, well, I mean, to contrast it with the difference in generations. So baby boomers, the majority of baby boomers in this country vote for the 2 major parties. Gen X are very similar, but they lean more towards the Labor Party. But the stark difference between those 2 cohorts and younger Australians is just massive. It's younger Australians that are the double haters, as we like to call them. They are least likely to have a values alignment with any registered political party in the country, and more likely to choose independence.
So you've been talking about this since the beginning of the campaign,
That's
using
right.
the term, the vote is going to spray.
Yes.
How much could we see it spraying?
And it depends where you are. So if you're in Melbourne's western suburbs, like the federal seat of Hawke, which the coalition are hoping they can pick up, what I think will happen there is with the primary vote is, yes, it will come off Labor, but it will go everywhere. It won't coalesce around the coalition. Likewise, we can go to regional parts of New South Wales, Patterson, another example. I expect that to go again to minor parties if Labor's got a problem. And I think the same will occur with the coalition when they are under pressure and they start losing votes, and they will win some seats at this election. I think the same will happen.
Now, in our previous interview with the spokespeople, James Patterson, of course, doesn't want to start talking about postmortems and what went wrong, but talk to me about the kind of figures that Peter Dutton has been seeing in the course of the campaign. Anthony Albanese as well, but obviously it's been more stark for Peter Dutton.
Yeah, in all campaigns, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of components from the macro right down to polling booth, manning the 7,000 polling booths, so that those voters that want a how to vote card and follow a how to vote card will follow it. But essentially in these campaigns, it mostly boils down to 2 competing forces, which is it's time for a change and they've reached minimum expectations, the opposition, or better the devil you know. And at the moment, better the devil you know is the strongest sentiment. And that has been fuelled in some ways by Trump and the share market crash, which is not to say the coalition were sort of on track for a win by any stretch of the imagination, but that sort of turbocharged that sentiment.
How much are they responsible in the way that they reacted to it? So you get it, that's bad luck. Sometimes you get bad luck. They got bad international circumstances. Was there anything they could have done at that point to change direction, or is changing direction during a campaign as dangerous as sticking with maybe a bad hand?
Campaigns are about moments, and Labor has owned all the moments, from the budget and the pre-positioning, Jim Chalmers taking the economic narrative, the coalition deciding not to adopt the tax cuts. But I think in this case, the Trump phenomenon, we saw in Canada. There were other elements, of course, and components to that as well. But it did turbocharge that. If I'm going to take more risk, I need to be convinced of the risk. And the coalition haven't really articulated why change.
Now, James Patterson wouldn't answer this question, maybe you will. What number of seats does Peter Dutton need to win tomorrow to secure his position as leader?
I think in the high 60s, 65, 67 seats, a 10-seat gain notionally on the redistribution, on using Anthony Green's redistribution pendulum. I think 10 seats. Victoria will be key because the preconditions are there for quite a few seats for the Liberals. And if they can't pick up seats, bearing in mind they've got 8 out of 38 on the new pendulum, that signals major problems for the party moving forward, because if you can't compete in Victoria, you just can't win the election and future elections.
Let's talk about the phenomenon from last time, of course, the community independence, the teal independence. Are we going to see that phenomenon secured this time?
Well, we've got 20% of all seats that are obviously up for grabs that are being contested by an incumbent independent or an independent that is challenging an incumbent MP or the Greens. So there's, and 6 million Australians, or close to 6 million Australians, are going to vote for an independent minor party and so on. So I think it's definitely here to stay, and I think a lot of the independents are going to be re-elected. And I wouldn't rule out seeing an independent be elected in seats like Wannon, Monash and Bradfield, for example.
So you'll be watching those
absolutely
very closely as they come in.
Yeah.
Now, there's been some chatter in the final week about the role of One Nation, its vote maybe going up slightly. Has that been borne out? And is the issue of preferences with One Nation actually meaningful? Or are they going to revert to their usual habits where One Nation voters preference at around 65%?
Well, as both major parties have a low ceiling on their vote, then...
Just explain what that means.
So low 30s, it's not a high. You go back even a decade ago and they were sort of closer to 40, if not over 40. And typically with a little party, your coalition, you need to be pretty close to 45 to win an election on 76 seats. So I think in terms of preference flows, obviously critical, more critical than ever before. If we're looking at 33% of the electorate voting other parties, that sort of flow of preferences and the discipline of preference flows will be critical. One Nation typically lands at around 65% flowing back. There's been reports that up to 90% of One Nation votes will flow back to the Liberal Party. No. Nationals and Liberals, when they are in three-corner contest, they're lucky if they get 90% swap between those two parties and they're in coalition. So 90 is a fairly heroic assumption. But obviously, if it were to be that high, well, then that will have a significant impact because we're tracking One Nation at around 8%. Obviously, in some seats it'll be higher, lower in some seats.
Now, I want to just talk very briefly about the Greens, particularly the 3 seats that they gained last time in Queensland. Climate is a different issue this time round. It's not as salient. The Morrison issue is not there. What do you think happens to those Green seats in Brisbane?
So across the seats that we're tracking, and they are largely regional outer suburban electorates, the growth of Green support amongst Gen Z, so those Australians in their 20s mainly, is astronomical. It's the largest I've ever seen. It's hovering somewhere in the low to mid-30s in terms of primary vote. So we can only assume that in areas where the Greens traditionally hunt, like in these seats, they're going to do quite well. However, in the federal seat of Brisbane, that might not be the case, obviously, because they've got a low floor in terms of their primary vote, and they will be under pressure by both the LNP and Labor. Flip side, you come down to Victoria, and you've got Wills and McNamara that obviously are the 2 seats that the Greens are focusing on. There are many people within Labor's ranks that are extremely concerned about Wills. There's no doubt about that. And they should be, because if you go down the southern part of that electorate, again, huge numbers of Gen Z. McNamara, it's a toss of the coin.
All right. This is the final question, and briefly from both of you. Obviously, lots of talk about where the polls sit right now, but we keep saying they have been wrong in the past. Can they still be wrong, or have they advanced enough that when they arrive at this point in the campaign, they get it right?
Well, the key factor in this campaign, like every other campaign, is the soft vote segment. It was in the high 40%, which is an extraordinarily high number, very atypically high. It has now come into low 20s, which is, again, atypically high 24 hours out from polling day. So where that soft vote lands will be critical, but notwithstanding, I think the coalition performed better in the last week relative to other weeks in the campaign, more message discipline, less off-message commentary. But it would be hard to see that soft vote segment breaking hugely towards the coalition to make a significant difference, bearing in mind almost half the electorate have already voted, and we know the polls at that period were very strong for Labor, so you'd expect that to reflect that on counting night.
We will see. Gentlemen, thank you, both of you, very much indeed.
Thank you, Sarah.